Namaste everyone. Our topic for today's exploration is living a well-examined life. It is based on Mother's commentary on the Dhammapada. As we all know, Dhammapada is the Buddhist scripture, the most revered and read scripture. And how we see it is like a manual for contemplation. And Mother's commentary gives us a path, a way of how to follow and bring those teachings into practice, into our daily life. And today we have selected a small portion from that commentary to explore and see how other concerns in our daily living can be solved and how can we seek answers in these words of wisdom. When I talk about a well-examined life, it looks like we are taking a glass, a lens, and closely looking at our day-to-day activities. The thing different from looking at an everyday life, just a mundane routine, and looking closely with the words of wisdom is that we are looking with an intention to grow, to progress, to evolve. The examination has a hidden purpose of evolution and not just categorizing or identifying. That how can I become more aware so that I can live a better life? If we look at all the teachings, what the Buddhist text tells us, it primarily deals with the mind, how to discipline the mind, how to control the mind, how can mind be used as a fit instrument, how can it help us? And in all our daily living, we understand that most of our problems originate in our mind, in our thinking. When we overthink things, when we get entangled in all the aspects of the possibilities and probabilities of life and lose touch with the present moment. When we are not present or connected in the moment, when we are more, our thoughts are concerned about what if of life, we recognize that most of our thoughts are centered around fear, that what can go wrong, what is the outcome of what I'm doing, what will be the result. So when we focus our attention away from the process and become very product obsessed, that is where the issue comes in. Because we all understand on the path of yoga, we talk about perfection and how perfection is important, how sincerity is required for that perfection. But often in our day-to-day understanding, we lay our attachment of perfection with the product, what comes out. But the key lies in the process, the perfection of the process, that how well I am examining the process of my life. So if I see the composition of our life, we can look at it into three aspects, that the person, process, and personality. These are the three components around which our life revolves. Personality is what you and I understand from the outside, what is made up of our interaction with the world, what we take from the world, what we give to the world, how other situations around us affect us, our thought process, our emotions. And person is a way, that deep sense of self which we hold within ourselves. That yes, all of us sitting here, that there's something within me which exists, which may I not be able to articulate it well, I may not be able to pinpoint well that what it is, but there's some experience beyond the personality, beyond the exchange of everyday life that binds us together. And all of our search is somewhere to go and connect to that person, to that space within. And a well-examined life in a way is how can we design processes for ourselves that the person, the sense of self which we have inside can also express itself in the personality which we have outside. So that relationship between the inner and the outer, the bridging between the inner and the outer is what the process, the journey lies. That is what our journey of yoga becomes. Like we all understand that the literal translation of the word yoga is union. But what are we uniting? At the absolute, we understand that yes, we have to unite with that one supreme. But what is the process of that union to happen? The first step begins with uniting the inner and the outer. And to unite the inner and the outer, first we have to become aware of what is inner, what is outer. And because like how we understand in the integral philosophy, the whole idea of near to the far approach, we begin examining our outer life, our outer engagements, and draw patterns in our outer engagements and see that how those outer engagements can help us go inside. So that outer life, everything on the outside becomes a tool to go inside. And that is when the functionality of the life leads us to the composition of what we are made of. So we understand the functionality, all of our ideas that how can I make my life better? How can I make my thoughts better? How can I purify my emotions? So the whole process of purification begins by uniting the composition and the functionality together. And again, that process of throwing light on the composition becomes our journey of yoga, becomes our journey of evaluating and exploring. And it leads us to the idea that I am not really looking just to become a better person in one particular domain of my life, but to purify the entire process of my life. And that is how we don't live in small snippets of life. We express our desire and slowly turn it into an aspiration for the purification of our entire being. And that is how the purification of our entire being helps us in becoming what we know. So as I said, that when you hear the title Examined Life, it looks like that we are entering through the mind. And we understand that the mind is something which seeks understanding. It's the domain of wisdom. But as sadhaks of integral yoga, we understand that it's not just the knowledge which we are seeking, we are also seeking to become that knowledge. So it's the combination of knowledge and will that comes into play when we walk the path of integral yoga. That it's not just enough to know what is right or what is wrong, but it is also how do I bring it into practice. And often we see it in our life when we look at any situation or we examine any aspect of our personality, we realize that most of the problems we face in the day-to-day life are problems of communication. It can be a problem of communication in my own thoughts and emotions. It can be a problem of communication between two people. Now we see it between two countries or anything. Essentially, it boils down to the idea of communication. And why do we have so much of problem of communication? Because we are looking, or rather we are not concentrating on the right thing. We have become so problem-oriented that we have forgotten that the magic lies in solution seeking. And solution seeking in a way not through the mind. Because if we understand the principle or the very fundamental of mind, mind understands in duality. The basic nature or the basic characteristic of mind is either or. And it's only when we reconcile, when we move from either or to and, then the possibility of solution emerges. Often we see that when we find ourselves in conflict, immediately the idea comes in as if the opposite party has so many of errors, and it is so evident and so obvious for me to see that the other person is wrong or what are the faults of the other person, and we wonder that when I can see it, why the other person can't see it. And the fun part of it is that the other person also has the same side of story, that they can see so many errors in us and they're like, I can see it, why you can't see it? Because both the parties are just seeing half of the story. Like we often hear those sentences, no, there are three sides of the story, your side, my side, and the real side. So how does one goes or moves to the real side? When we really take that stepping back, making an objective view of what is happening and realize that what really is the situation. It is not my perspective or your perspective, but what is the interaction happening? Because we understand that there are so many factors involved, there are people involved, there are situation involved, and like how I said in the beginning, it's the person, process, and personality. That is the combination we are exploring. And exactly this is why when we come to integral philosophy, we realize that Sri Aurobindo's work essentially talks about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So when we read his work, we realize that any argument which he presents, first he gives us that what it is, then he tells us what it is not. And then he brings us to a point where we see the whole wide variety of things coming together. Like often Sri Aurobindo has said that what he's saying is true, but he also knows that the opposite can be also true. But what he's saying is more truer. So whole idea of truth, we understand it, it's like my truth, your truth. So we are not concentrating on the truth, we are concentrating on our version of truth. And our version of truth is really not as objective as it could be. Because what happens is all of us have that sense of living, have that experience. Like, for example, all of us are sitting here, I'm talking, you are listening, but there's some sort of interpretation happening in all of your mind depending on where your state of being is. So what your eyes are receiving or your ears are receiving and what your brain is perceiving and interpreting it differs for person to person, because what happens in between that reception and perception, that small gap, that is where the feelings, that is where the emotions, that is where the mechanical nature of mind takes over. And precisely the journey of yoga is to become more and more conscious of that little gap. That when I am receiving information from the world, when I am experiencing the world, how am I interpreting it? How am I experiencing it? And more in the beginning, we see that it is just one tiny gap. And that is why we often start with reflecting later. We start with introspection, that once we have been in the situation, we were so identified with the situation, we didn't realize what is wrong, what is right. But after the situation, when we are reflecting, we are seeing that, okay, this could have been done, that could have been done, it would have been better. So all our analysis happens after the situation. And that is an indicator that we are using the faculties of the mind to break things, to categorize things. But the moment we move a little beyond the categorization, we really examine from the point that where all these things come together. And then we move from really introspection to that witness attitude. Like in the yogic philosophy, we keep talking about and keep emphasizing on the fact of Sakshi Bhav, witness attitude. How is that witness attitude possible? When we really develop that objective view of a subjective self. And how can we develop that objective view of a subjective self? When we don't identify with the problem, but we identify the problem. The moment we identify with the problem, we become the problem and we lose that witness attitude. So how can we really create that difference, create that distance, so that we are more and more focused, we are more and more in connection with the composition, with really that divine element within us, which we have a faint idea of, we often experience it in certain situations, how to let it come out, let it more and more govern our life. So that is the whole journey of on what are we concentrating on. So are we concentrating more on what is not, or we are concentrating more on what we want to be? Because we also know and understand that we say that where the mind goes, energy goes. So where am I taking my mind? And in our daily combination of thoughts and emotions, we see that usually it's the emotions that overpower the thinking rather than the other way around. So how am I really focusing on the purification process? Am I really focusing on how can I really understand that what is happening here without being self-critical? So another error which we often find ourselves committing on the path of exploration, that as I said, we identify with the problem rather than identifying what the problem is. And as a consequence, what happens is we become self-critical rather than becoming self-conscious. And the moment we become self-critical, our immediate, natural, instinctive need of self-preservation kicks in. So all at that point we understand is, how do I protect myself? How do I defend myself? So the whole idea of exploration, the whole idea of joy of being really takes a back seat, and what happens is the primitive nature of protecting ourselves, of preserving ourselves, of defending ourselves comes in. And the moment we let the lower nature overpower us, overtake us, then we lose all the connect with the higher ranges of being. And when the mind can really become an instrument of the higher, it really looks like an issue to us. So the journey of mind of being an issue to an instrument lies in the idea of making our objective view of a subjective self, of not really identifying with what is happening, not being really self-critical, but self-conscious of what is happening. And that is how it really becomes true to the statement, which is an often celebrated statement, that all life is yoga. We understand that when we say all life is yoga, it means that moment to moment basis, we are aspiring for that union. And when we are aspiring for the union with the Absolute, we are starting with attempting to unite our own inner and outer. And to unite our own inner and outer, there's a sense of sincerity required. And that is where, if we look at Mother's symbol, all the qualities come into practice and play for us when we start on this path, that how are these qualities helping me in the purification process. And that is why it is more of consistency than intensity which helps us to walk the path. That on a day-to-day basis, how sincere I am, even if I've chosen one tiny little habit of mine which I need to change, am I really constantly attempting to offer it, to have that intention to purify it, and not just stay in my head that, okay, these are the good ideas which one needs to live by. But how does one live by? It's only when we apply, we see all the errors. Like if we look at the whole structure of our personality, we know that the mind understands. That is the need of the mind. We know that the vital or the emotional aspect seeks satisfaction. We know that the physical, all it requires is safety. So when I start examining, do I know that, okay, if this is a space where my mind is seeking understanding, but my physical is activated and all it is seeking is safety. So if there's a communication happening when I really want to understand, but what I'm instead doing, I'm just trying to make that I want to protect myself. And that is what happens, the result of what I was talking about, the communication. Why there is so much of miscommunication? Because when two people are talking, or if there's an interaction happening, in actually of understanding what the other person is saying, in my head I am automatically saying that what will be my counter argument, what will I say to know that the person will know that I know better, or I also know the answer. So it really takes us away from the truth of our being, and all it preoccupies our mind is how can I prove that I also know. So that whole sense of identification with our outer nature comes in. And the moment that need comes in, it takes us far away from that divine experience which we are intending to express in the world. And that is why when we sit in silence, we often wonder that I do understand these things, I do read about it. When I'm sitting in silence, I can also understand that, yeah, these things are wrong with me. But the moment I step out in the world, I'm again back to my original nature. I'm again back to who I was on the outside. Because the gap between the inner and the outer, the process which is required to unite, the bridging which has to happen, is a consistent journey. It is not a one-time effort. So I read, I understand, I experience, but that I also come and implement it. So and that is why all life becomes a journey, because every day in every activity, I try to express more and more what I experience. And when I give that message to my mind that this is the journey, this is the path which I am treading on a day-to-day basis, in and out, in and out, in and out, that is how my mind understands that this is your journey, this is the process, this is the method. And that is why if we look at integral yoga, Sri Aurobindo has not given us one method, that these are the steps you follow and this is how you will become a practitioner of integral yoga. He has just laid down the journey for us, that this is what needs to be explored. Now you take responsibility with your own sincerity and see how your inner and outer bridge together. If your entry point is through the mind, then mind becomes your tool to do this in and out. If more of emotional exploration is your journey, then you use emotions, you use vital understanding to express. So what is your entry point to it? You start from that point, you concentrate on that, and that becomes a window for you to experience and explore the whole vast range of your own psychological makeup. And then you build your tool. Then you build your understanding of who you are, how the world works, and how are you interacting. So that is how it becomes a dual process. So at one level in the integral path, we are talking about silence, sincerity, and how one needs to be and understand the engagement with the higher realms. On the other aspect, or the other hand, we are talking about sharpening. So at one level, I'm talking about in silence, I have to connect to the deeper aspect of myself and the higher aspect of myself. And once I establish that connection, the contact, then I'm also focusing on sharpening my outer instrument, because these mind, emotions, and body, these are the instruments which help me function in the world. So in silence, I establish that contact, and then when I come in, I express with sharpening my instrument so that I understand the world better, I experience the world better. So silencing and sharpening both come together for living a well-examined life. And that is how the functionality is more and more infused with the composition, with the divine intervention. So it is not about how I said that either I have to live inside or I have to live outside, or there is no demarcations that this is my spiritual life, this is my material life. The demarcations or the differences are just for a tiny portion of mind to understand what it is. It's like the missing puzzles are kept outside, that okay, these are the puzzles which we have to bring together. So bringing the puzzles together and creating our own story, that is the flexibility, that is the possibility, that is the freedom the path of integral yoga has given us. That there is no predefined ideas of what to do. Only one thing is required from us, a sincere aspiration to evolve. And the more we examine our life, the more we bring our awareness to what we are doing on a day-to-day basis. Very simple, and not just identify with it, but experience it, express it. Like very simple example, how this nature of mind really wants to attach itself. Now when we get any information, like in this age of social media or WhatsApp messages, we know the moment we get any spiritual message or any message which looks like a motivational message, most of the people, what I've observed around is we just forward it. There are hardly people who actually read it, go through it, understand it, contemplate it. It's like, okay, I have received, now I have to send it because I think that person really needs it, or that will really help the person, uplift the mood or motivate the person. So very subtly what we are doing is there's a kind of identification here that is happening, that this is the message which is coming to you through me. So if it is coming through me, it is assumed already that I to know. So we just stick ourselves to just knowing, and the illusion of knowing gives us an idea of that, okay, I understand also. So then it also creates more complexity, more duality in our life, because I'm like, oh, I read such good stuff, I read all the spiritual texts, but how am I not able to become better in my life? How am I not able to solve the certain issues? Because if we really bring our attention to our mind, there are just 2-3 pet problems all human beings have, and our mind constantly keeps rotating around it. We keep building narrations, ideas, what are the possibilities, what can happen, all of those things which clearly takes us away from what we really are and what we really can do. So to really bring our mind out of that illusionary world to really becoming aware of the present moment. So how is like really presence very important over preparation? Because preparation is a way which keeps the mind engaged, but it's the presence which helps the mind express. So it's only when the mind is able to express the higher truth, there's a possibility of us becoming the higher truth. And it's only when we become the higher truth, the possibility of transformation, the possibility of divine earth on life becomes a true living reality and not just an idea for us. Like how Sri Aurobindo has said that integral yoga begins where all yoga ends. Because he's attempting to tell us that it is not just knowing about the absolute, but it is also experiencing the absolute. That is our journey. And it's in a very simple way, we understand that how the world around us is built. We have the whole idea of education system, then we have the idea of working. So we go to school or college with an intention that we will gain that knowledge and then we will work. But if we are gaining the knowledge, which is a borrowed knowledge, which is devoid of experience, then when we are going out in the world, we are only repeating the other person's experience or thought. So there is no originality happening. Similarly, if you look at it from the lens of yoga, if I'm only studying that, okay, these are the different aspects of yoga, this is different philosophers or different spiritual masters who have said it. So I'm in a way gathering knowledge which has its place. But when knowledge then accompanied with the experiential understanding, so in an education setup, like in a university setup, if I'm only understanding or going with an intention that, okay, this is what the teacher is saying, yes, this is what it is. So till the time my own involvement is not there, my own effort is not there, I will only gather second-hand knowledge, and then when I go out in the world and apply, I will only apply the second-hand knowledge. So what in our everyday practical life, what is happening is that we are understanding, we are bringing knowledge and our own experience, and then we are applying. So we understand the first step is to know the divine, and the second step is to become the divine. And in the beginning, because we are looking from the lens of our mind, we see it as different steps, step 1, step 2. But as we grow more and more into the process, more and more forward in our journey, we realize that they are simultaneous. So I'm experiencing, I'm expressing, I'm experiencing, I'm expressing, and that is how my process is helping me become more and more closer. And that is why every moment is a moment of possibility of expression of the divine. Every moment is a potential which holds to become closer to the divine. And that is when the whole idea of all life is yoga becomes very true to us, that we are concentrating on the present moment, we are concentrating on the potential and the possibilities. We are not really identifying with the situation, but we are really examining it by developing an objective view of our subjectivity. We are very, very consistent over and about our whole understanding and nature of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, so that we come out of the loops in which our mind revolves and really place the mind in service of the higher, so that the higher can express not just through the mind but all the aspects of our being. So this is what a well-examined life looks like to us, that every moment is the potential for the manifestation of the higher. And that is what my intention and aspiration is for myself and for all of us, that we really examine our life and offer it to the service of the divine, so that we can really bring in the divine life upon earth. Thank you. Namaste. Now I would like Dr. Bijlani to come in and share his thoughts on the subject.
Aditi has touched upon a very important subject today, living a well-examined life. In the fast-paced life that we have today, it has become very normal, natural, and so spontaneous that we sometimes don't even notice that we are just living from event to event, from task to task, without thinking about what it is all about, where we are going. And if at all we are getting some confidence in our life moving in the right direction, it is from the fact that everybody seems to be doing the same thing. And we feel that since we are following the crowd, we are doing what everybody else is doing, we must be doing everything right. And beyond that, we really do not go into any real examination of our own self and the way our life is going. She started with a very beautiful analogy, examining life. And how do we examine things? The analogy she gave was that of a lens, that is looking life through a lens. Now, what type of a lens? A close-up lens or a wide-angle view lens? Those of you who have, and most of you have that much knowledge of photography, these days everybody owns a camera without even owning a camera. So we all know what is a close-up and what is a wide-angle view. When it comes to examining life, both are important. And the close-up, so that we can get a good view of where what is wrong and what is right, and also a wide-angle view, so that we can fit our own little life into that wider picture and see how it is related to that bigger picture, the direction in which the divine is taking our life as a tiny part of that larger picture, as one little cog in that giant wheel, the wheel of Maya, the wheel of creation. So both types of views are important, and therefore I think this analogy of a lens was a very apt analogy. Another thing that struck me was that our life has become rather product obsessed. We don't think of all the elements involved, the personality, the person, and the process. It's all product obsessed. What is it leading to? What is it producing? What is it that the world is getting from it? And sometimes even a more narrow view of what am I getting from it. This is what the mother has called one of the afflictions of the modern age, utilitarianism. We are looking for utility in everything. And then she has also pointed out one more important thing. While we are so obsessed with utility and sometimes very enamored of things which appear highly useful and therefore important to do, everything in the world has only a relative utility. So in terms of that larger picture, neither we as an individual nor everything that we do has anything beyond that relative utility. So everybody is important, but nobody is indispensable. Everything that we do could be important in one way, but then nothing is terribly important. That is what we have to realize, and when we look at it that way, we will be able to perhaps overcome our obsession for this utility and look at it in terms of what is it that is giving us true joy, what is it that is giving us mental peace, what is it that is making the world a better place to live in. These are some of the larger sort of byproducts of whatever we do, which go far beyond utilitarianism. Another important thing that she brought out was that instead of looking at snippets, we should be looking at the entire life. And that is in fact what integral yoga is about. It is about the body. Yes, the body should be healthy, it should be perfect. But then not just the body, also the mind. The mind should also be taken towards perfection. Both aspects of the mind, the emotional part of the being and the intellect. And not just physical and mental perfection or physical, vital and mental perfection, but then we also have to see how it is being brought into our everyday life, which means that we take into this entire process of yoga all parts of the being and all our life, all that we are and all that we do. When we pick up all this and make it a subject, make it the material for the practice of yoga, then only yoga becomes truly integral. Okay, another distinction that struck me was the contrast between being self-critical and self-conscious. Yes, up to a point, yes, we should be self-critical, but not to the point of self-flagellation, constant self-flagellation, not to the point of it becoming that false type of humility that I am full of all these faults and defects and so on and so forth, and therefore I am beyond redemption. Looks very humble, but at the same time it becomes counterproductive because we cannot then get out of it. We feel that now that I have acknowledged how useless I am, I have done enough and I need not do anything beyond that. But the fact is that we can always move from wherever we are and go towards what we should be, and that requires moving from being self-critical to being self-conscious. That is a true and conscious evaluation of where we stand, what our strengths and weaknesses are, and moving in a direction where our weaknesses can get replaced by a new set of strengths, a new set of values, a new set of what we should actually be doing. The mother has said at one point that to know is good, to do is better, and to be, that is perfect. And that again Aditi elaborated upon, and what she talked about was moving from knowledge to practice. Knowing something is good, but then doing is better. Doing is practice. And why that can become a lengthy and difficult process is because knowledge alone is not enough. Knowledge needs to be internalized, it needs to get deeper, and that takes time. It can't be done in a great hurry. But at the same time, just because it takes time, it's difficult and needs effort, doesn't mean that we don't have to try. Because if we don't try, then we can spend all our life just knowing and not being able to put it into practice. So while that aspiration to put the knowledge into practice should be calm, it should not be impatient, but at the same time it should be a constant aspiration, which again she emphasized, that it's the constancy, it is the persistence, it is the perseverance which are important. And knowledge will lead to practice, practice will strengthen the knowledge, because knowledge becomes real to us only when we put into practice, and both these together will lead to what is becoming. That is, we will become more and more what we know and what we are practicing. We'll be able to identify with it. So that is how we as a person start changing. We started becoming a new person, and that is what becoming is. And since we are moving towards perfection, and perfection is something that we identify only with the divine, we are moving towards an identification, towards a union with the divine. So in short, living a well-examined life means that we examine life, examine the way we are living, and we continue examining. And this is a perpetual process, because life will always bear some more examination, and it is this process through which we'll keep growing in the true sense. In the true sense, automatically means not only for ourselves, but also for the world around us. And that is how yoga, Sri Aurobindo's yoga, as again she pointed out, goes beyond all the other yogas, and in fact it begins where other yogas end, because other yogas may end with personal liberation, personal salvation, but integral yoga is one that has a very strong element of the collective. The individual is the unit of the collective, but at the same time the individual is always conscious of the fact that the aim is collective, and this individual growth is meant to eventually lead to a collective upliftment of the human race towards a goal which will make this world a much better place to live in fact, bring heaven down on earth.